Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 13 of A Recovery Machine. I'm your co-host, Nathan, and I'm joined, as always, by Corey. How's it going over there, Corey?
Hey, Nathan. Good afternoon. It's going well. Happy to have our 13th episode, Baker's Dozen.
Yeah. Who knew? It's good, though. I'm still having fun, so I think if we're having fun, then we'll keep going.
Same here.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
Well, the first thing you and I are going to talk about is it's a question that has come up a lot in groups that you and I attend together and some groups that I attend personally, of how to stay mentally healthy and on the right track in our recovery, despite a really stressful time that we're all living in, both globally and within our own communities. And with all of the news and information that we take in on a daily basis, how to do it. So we are both aware that it impacts people in and out of our recovery communities, but we certainly see it a lot in meetings that we attend that it's hard on people right now. Hey,
it is definitely tough. And one thing that I'm seeing is people who are maybe already kind of riding the edge as far as how much personal stress they can handle in their life overall or their job. A lot of people, it's a job where they're in recovery and they've maybe found a new way to deal with stress, which is great. But because they're so close to what they can tolerate, the extra burden of the global events that we're witnessing in Eastern Europe and the last 2 years of just weird event after weird event. I think this is pushing some people into a situation where they're struggling to manage with anything that they're using as a kind of an escape. So if that's drugs and alcohol, then maybe some people who had a situation that was being managed well are now kind of concerned with, say, how much they're drinking, or maybe it's food. You're in somebody who eats to feel better, and now they're being pushed to. They feel they're in a situation where they have to kind of use that calming method almost too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously this is a big question, and nobody has there's no one answer for everybody, but we have seen over the last few years techniques put forth and ideas that together, I think I know that when I'm having a tough time, if I pay attention to these things and get into a rhythm with them, it makes a big difference. So we're going to do our best to go over those and pass those along. And hopefully, whether you're early in recovery or not in recovery or whoever you are, maybe you'll find something useful in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess from a personal standpoint, we can start there. What's the impact for you, Corey, are you feeling this kind of background noise? I know we've talked about it a little bit, but how is it affecting you?
Well, I early on in recovery and within the first year especially, I felt like I was in sort of a hypersensitive state where I really had a low tolerance for taking in stressful information beyond the things that I had to take on. The stress of going through recovery and going through a rehab program and all that stuff. But I found myself unable to take on information in the news, or that the things that were happening in the world were just too much for me. And the thing that I find interesting is that goes back to when I was a kid. I remember, we would watch the news almost every night, at dinner time, kind of a thing. And I remember having a reaction to it then and feeling like it was just too much negativity. It stressed me out. And that was before the age of social media and before the age of the real flood of the internet. And it was too much then. And thinking about how things are now, and it's just like tenfold, 20-fold, 100-fold. And it's still too much. But now as I'm feeling better, I'm more willing to take in more of that information, and my sensitivity to that kind of information is changing. And I do notice, though, that I do feel it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel it also. And you're right to say things have changed a lot in our media world, as far as a lot of the mainstream or legacy media outlets are very clickbaity now. They're just sensationalizing everything they can. And unfortunately, the way humans are wired, we tend to react to negative news with more of a emotional pull, I guess. So they know that, and there's very few objective sources of news left. I mean, they're out there, but it's tough. It's really tough. And I've never, I mean, I haven't been alive that long, but I've been long enough to see a few different approaches to providing that type of information. And even in academia now, I'm finding that I just can't trust the sources that I thought I could. And this puts me in a awkward position as a professional and as a human being. You know, the amount of time that an individual is willing to spend hunting down an answer and still not knowing whether or not how accurate the answer is. And of course, everybody has a different level of ability when it comes to data mining. So, I mean, what do you do, right? I think what you're saying is you throttle it. You know, it's hard to, like, you have one advantage in that you're clever enough not to be on Facebook. And
correct.
And I have found this, I've tried to do that, but it's very difficult if you're running any sort of a business, because the benefits of those connections are, I mean, there's real value there, but at the same time, you don't want to be spending 2 hours a day scrolling through that horrendous feed, because the whole thing is designed to be reactionary. So I do a fairly good job of limiting myself with that, but I think we're both on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
And Twitter can be bad. I mean, everybody
Absolutely
knows. Like, I think we brought this up before, where it's almost like you go into a trance while you're scrolling through, right? And you're thinking in your head, like, why am I? There's nothing here, man. Like, why you keep looking and looking and looking and looking, but there's nothing there. And it's like playing a slot machine for that dopamine hit.
That's right. And it's never positive. It's never good news. And apart from a story about a dog at the end of the nightly news, that's never positive. And so if that's the goal here, is to have, positive mental health or good mental health and positive, constructive, healthy thinking, to really tally up what the information that we take on is, it's primarily pretty negative stuff. Yeah. And that's something that I have really realized is, the negativity of it all is out of my control. So the only thing I can control then is how much I actually take in.
Yeah, that's right. It's tend to the garden that you can touch, and outside of that sphere of influence, which is 99% of everything we encounter. I mean, what can we do personally in a lot of these situations? I mean, I can't even, if I pay too much attention to what's going on with, say, the crisis in our own backyard with people with fentanyl and the way our drug system is set up, that alone is enough to get me pretty agitated if I just allow myself to see what's going on there.
Yeah.
And obviously it doesn't take very many of those types of injustices, or what I perceive to be something that's being dealt with in a really foreign, bizarre way that doesn't make sense to me. It it kind of drives me, like you get very distracted by it.
Yeah. And going back a moment to what you said, that there's still a dopamine kick there. And I think that we often purely associate dopamine with pleasure. Or you hear it referred to more in the context of a pleasurable experience, a drug experience, any kind of physical touch or a thrill ride or whatever it may be. But it is very much still present within a negative experience. And looking at MRIs and CT scans of what the brain is doing when it's taking on news information or violent imagery or shocking, horrific imagery, there's still a flood that's happening in the brain.
Yeah, it's so strange, eh?
Yeah, and that flood is keeping us there. It's keeping us in it because it's telling us that even though we feel distressed or stressed, it's giving us that chemical reward there. And so, to me, the cure to that is to override that if we can, and step back from it, or kind of put ourselves back in the driver's seat of it.
Yeah, definitely easier said than done. But yeah, that the dopamine response on what we would perceive to be negative events. You're talking about brain scans and watching people's responses. I saw one of those for people who play slot machines regularly,
mm-hmm.
and they receive a dopamine kind of flood upon losing, like when they're finished with all their money, which is completely counterintuitive, but it's the evolutionary purpose, I guess, is to keep you engaged in what's going on. Like, it's okay. That's a serious event. You just blew $500 on this machine. You got nothing for it. And for some reason that makes a human engaged and they want to come back.
Yeah. And I mean, it's even to the point where in like a casino setting, they're playing, when you pull the slot and lose, they're playing the like wah, wah tune to give you a cue, a Pavlovian cue to go again.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. The mind is a fascinating little device. So yeah, we agree, and I think most people would agree that we've been living in some weird times. What are some of the things that you have found useful to? I mean, one thing you've done is you've limited the amount of social media you're consuming, and you're throttling your consumption of news. What other kind of things do you find personally helpful?
I think, a couple of things come to mind. First one, as an easy little tool to use, would be to be aware of how long you are engaging. So say if it's social media, how long am I actually engaging in it? Or if it's a news program, how long am I watching that for? So I find that I'm able to keep a check on myself close enough that I don't need to set a timer. But that's an idea that I've heard, that set a timer and then stick to that and say, okay, I'm only going to be perusing social media for 5 or 10 minutes. And then when that timer goes off, I'm off. And I mean, it's an interesting experiment in that if the timer goes off and you and you tell yourself, I'll just keep going. Mm-hmm. That's saying a lot too. That's saying that potentially you're in a state where you're having trouble overriding that, or you're having trouble stepping away from that, which sounds a lot like an addictive behavior to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just to add to that, I know there's apps available that will monitor the amount of time you're spending on your phone, or monitor the amount of time you're spending on specific apps like social media. And I think for a lot of people, it would be beneficial just to get a baseline. Like, what's your average consumption? How long are you staring at your phone on average throughout the week? And then almost everybody would be shocked to see that number. I can tell you that right now. You see how many hours you've stared at your phone in a single day. And then once you've established that baseline, like anything else, you can start to chip away at it and try to do better. And I think it's if you are having an issue with discipline in that regard, then it's like anything else where you break it down into smaller steps and, try to do a little bit at a time, take on something that's not a drastic, I'm going to throw my phone out the window, but I'm just going to, bring it down to maybe an hour a day type of thing and try to stick with that.
Yeah, exactly. The other thought that I had about this was about checking in with ourselves as we are engaging in watching the news or with social media, say, that checking in with what our bodies are telling us. And so often these activities create quite a numbing effect or a zoning out effect where you're not really aware of your outside environment or your personal space, but also not necessarily aware of how your body is responding to that information that you're taking in. And so I think about the news right now with what's happening in Europe. And if I were to sit there and watch it for an hour, no, I don't let myself do that. But if I did, I know that if I checked in with myself and thought, what am I actually physically feeling right now? It would be that I felt tension in my body. Maybe I would feel hot in my face. Maybe I'd feel a sort of an anxious knot in the pit of my stomach. I wouldn't feel at ease and relaxed.
No, not at all.
No, and naturally, there's no criticism of anyone who's feeling that way. But if you think about it, that's kind of our body's way of telling us, like, whoa, we're at risk here, or we're under stress. And that's not to say that we don't take in that information at all, but maybe we make sure that we afford ourselves some time then to de-stress and to relax.
Yeah.
And so I know that meditation was one of the things we had talked about too, right?
Yeah, a meditation. I just wanted to add to that I find myself kind of going down these paths, looking at these weird, horrific news stories as an escape from whatever problem I've got going on or whatever task that I should be doing. It's a great procrastination tool because it does kind of get you out of whatever you're in. It gets you out of your own mental environment, but it's kind of it's not a great way to cope with that because, like you said, I mean, I'm the same way. I can handle a certain amount, and then I feel there's it's not a good. I just feel unhealthy. It's like I immediately have to exercise or something to kind of like bring myself back down to an unanxious state. But, meditation is. This is one that I'm really good at telling everybody to do and extremely poor at practicing. I have went through a whole bunch of different methods. I've studied Vipassana and all the Western mindfulness techniques and everything. And it just is. I never do it enough, and I know that it's because I'm a very results-driven individual. And that is completely contrary to what meditation is about. So even though I understand that, I'm still unable to make it a part of my daily routine. And I know I should. I can see clearly the benefits of it, but I just, for whatever reason, fail to commit. And I don't know what to do about that, Corey.
I don't think you're alone there. I know that you're not alone on that one. And I include myself in that too. But what I will say that has worked for me more than, the kind of the archetypal legs crossed, palms up type of meditation that has worked for me is, and I've done it specifically after watching something, watching a movie that has violence or that leaves me feeling uneasy at night. And I get into bed and then my mind is racing. And first of all, the thing I often notice is that my mind is not racing about that movie, but my mind follows this neural pathway where I'm thinking about other dark shit within my own life or in my own past.
So it set the tone. It's like it set the tempo for your mind.
It sort of rolls out the red carpet for those negative thoughts to waltz in. and then the movie or the visual that I saw in the news or whatever it may be just kind of backs off and lets my mind do the rest. So the easiest type of meditation that I have had success with has been visualizing a scene, visualizing a place, a happy place in my life. And so for me, that's Hornby Island. That's anywhere near the ocean. And I visualize that beach or visualize that spot in as much detail as I can muster up. And what I'm really doing, it doesn't really matter what the place is. I'm make sure it's a positive, a place that carries a lot of good memories. But suddenly I'm in control of my thoughts. And as I'm actively thinking about all of the details of it, those negative thoughts about stressful things aren't able to creep in because I've got the reins and I'm in control again. And then pretty soon I'm relaxed. But I find that especially initially I have to keep pulling myself back over and over and over again to that visual, or those negative thoughts will just kind of keep fighting back.
Yeah, what a pain in the ass, eh? I mean, wouldn't it be nice if your mind just kind of on its own stayed in a favorable neural pathway?
It would, but as they say, those neural pathways that we travel down the most are the easiest to come back to.
Yeah,
like the
but
well-practiced neural pathways.
Why are they this way for some people and seemingly not for others?
Yeah, it's a great question.
It's maddening sometimes, but
I know that I get a reward from even those negative pathways, like that gives my brain a little kick.
Yeah, I understand that not fully, but I think I can see it from a self-soothing aspect in that those are the most familiar roads to travel.
That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and obviously there's a whole bunch of different ways you can meditate, but I think the most important aspect of it is consistency. If you can do 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes, I think they've shown benefit with almost, I don't know about 5 or 10 minutes, but I've seen lots of studies on 20 minutes a day and showing all sorts of cognitive benefits from neuroregeneration to lowered heart rate and blood pressure and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, and of course we mentioned exercise. This is my biggest tool that I use to kind of combat that anxiety that I feel throughout the day, negativity, apathy, depression. It works for everything. And I think for me, it's an easier one to stick with because the reward is right there. I mean, if I do 20 minutes of cardio, I feel better. In fact, it's probably 10 minutes, I feel better. So it's, you look at it as far as a deal goes for a human, for a healthy thing to do, that's a pretty good deal, right?
So can I ask you, do you notice what you're thinking about when you're exercising? Are you thinking about your stress, or is your mind just thinking about the task?
Well, music is huge for me in that I reach kind of a state of mind where it's more of a, I don't know, I'm big on, I like metal and bands like Lamb of God or anything that's got like massive amounts of kind of angry energy. And for some reason that just, in a weird way, it calms me, but it also provides me with this type of energy that I think, especially for men, we don't have an outlet really for that type of, it's a violent kind of energy. Like you want to hurt something or break something, right? But if it's controlled and focused, it can be a very powerful driver. And that's how I find basically what happens is I'm not thinking about anything other than I'm just kind of lost in the music. It's like it's an escape, really.
Yeah.
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 So,
and to me, that's sort of like achieving the same thing as meditation in a way. Like
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a crossover there with like walking meditations and Tai Chi, right?
Yeah, and it's taking you out of your head, or taking you out of that headspace that you were in, kind of in the starting point.
Yeah.
So whatever that may be, I think it's just, the goal is to get there, right?
Yeah. And it's such a strange thing that I noticed probably 5 years ago, that my primary driver for training was now mental health, not physical.
Yeah.
I never used to even consider its benefits that way. I just trained because, I had whatever athletic thing going on, or for aesthetics, or it just was a part of my life. And then there was a kind of a light that went off there, and I'm like, I'm very much using this as a coping method.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what about you? What's your relationship with that?
I mean, that's something I've learned this year as being a really, really beneficial thing as well. And even if it's just connecting with people in my life, and midway through the day to go out and go for a walk, and to connect with nature, and to feel that the physical effect of the exercise, and to really be in touch with what my body is feeling, even if it's on a given day, if it's not a great feeling, if it's a negative feeling, I'm always feeling less stressed after I do that, every single time.
Yeah, we're meant to be outside, really. We've come to this place way faster than our biology has been able to catch up. So, just yesterday, on a biological evolutionary scale, we were outside all the time.
Yeah.
And now not so much. So you don't have the fresh air, you don't have the natural light, you don't have the pineal gland response and the melatonin response that you should with your circadian rhythm, because of you've lost touch with even when the sun comes up and when it goes down. They're all important things.
For sure. The other thing that we made note of was how does the stress from the world around us, and social media and the news and stuff, how does it affect our eating? And there is an effect, in terms of learning a coping strategy, or your brain going to a place where it sort of tells you that you need this. It can happen really subtly, where you get this message that you need to eat, and if you don't catch it, and I'll just talk about myself, if I don't catch that and think, well, what am I feeling right now that is making me think I need to go and eat something? Sometimes it's just the stress of what I'm taking in as well.
Yeah. Stress eating can be. I can go down that path very easily, and judging by what I've seen with people's health throughout the pandemic, I don't know, people talk about the COVID-20 or the COVID-25. I mean, you keep people indoors, and you stress them out, and you're going to see increases in all those coping mechanisms, healthy or not.
Yeah. And, I think about myself when I was at work, and when I was using opiates, and during the time that you're using opiates, you don't have an appetite. In fact, it's quite the opposite. But I would then have these days off, and would be stressed about any number of things. And I do look back at that and think, well, that's when I would overeat. I would not eat while I was on those string of shifts, and while I was using opiates, and then I would get off work, and I had to self-soothe, and had to kind of cope in another way. And at that time in my life, I sure as hell wasn't going to go and lift weights and get outside and do all these sort of healthy things that I've learned now. But it was just sort of like an autopilot, self-soothing method that was there for me.
Yeah. Did you find yourself developing a real sweet tooth
when I was using? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I didn't know that was a thing even until I'd started looking into what happens with the brain, and because I think at my worst, I was eating like like just a massive bowl of ice cream with like whipped cream and sauce, chocolate sauce and everything on. I was like eating that every day after work. And they're like the only thing I would eat, you know.
Wow.
And I mean, you could imagine what that's doing to your body, going all that time with no food, and then just smash. Here's some,
Yeah.
here's your insulin just absolutely through the roof.
Yeah.
Trying to deal with the glucose.
Yeah.
But yeah, not something you want to do on a regular basis, but it is because your brain is desperate for more dopamine, basically, and that's the carbs are the quickest. So, and sugar is the quickest of all.
Yeah. You know, I think the other risk of that is that this stress unmanaged does put us at risk of slips and relapses. If it's not food, if it's not addiction to screen time and other sort of maladaptive behaviors, it is also that there's a genuine risk for going back to whatever your drug of choice was.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't. Yeah, I don't know what the stats are as far as what's happened over the last couple of years, but down the line, I'm sure we're going to learn some fairly interesting details about how people coped with the change that we experienced over the last couple of years.
Well, the thing that comes to mind for me is, as at least provincially, at the time of all of the mass closures of everything, when we really shut down in our province, it was deemed that liquor stores were essential and that they were to stay open. And I think most people heard that and went, or went, oh, thank God. But yeah. I would love to know now, and I have not heard any kind of after the fact, things are reopened, let's follow up and see what that actually looked like. But I would be fascinated to know what that actually translates to by I was going to say by volume or by taxation or by sales. I mean, there certainly was a influx there.
There would have to be, yeah. And it's so weird that alcohol is the one that's allowed, you know, and now here cannabis, but why any drugs are not allowed, I don't know. But the way that we have regulated that one and kind of allowed that socially to be, I mean, obviously alcohol has a lot of social, it kind of facilitates social, makes social connecting easier, and it's kind of goes along with our culture as far as celebrations and stuff like that go. But it's just it's a strange concept when you look at it objectively.
it sure is. It sure is. And you might say that there was a vested interest in the population continuing to self-medicate for a period of time during the initial stages of things.
That could be argued for sure. And not just the initial stages, but moving on, there does, you know, when people say that there's a concerted effort to keep us in a state of angst, I believe they have an argument for that.
Yeah, agreed.
So I did want to mention something that does help me with, I know it's difficult to do anything consistently that requires you to kind of change your habits, but just committing to 5 minutes a day with exercise is a really solid way to make it kind of to let it become a habit in your life, and allowing yourself to, if you just, you start doing whatever you plan on doing, set your timer for 5 minutes. And if after 5 minutes, you still don't, you don't think you could do it, that's fine. Try again the next day. But frequently, if you start, that's the hardest part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. And it kind of speaks also to keeping our goals attainable and manageable, and not setting the bar too high. I think we've all been guilty of setting the bar too high for ourselves, or having these big lofty goals, and then we struggle to meet them, and then we feel down on ourselves, and then we go and self-soothe because we feel down on ourselves.
Yeah, this is the perfectionist cycle nightmare. Yep. And it's taken me a long time to train myself to be kinder and find a balance between discipline and the mental environment that I'm cultivating. Whether I can't, before I was a savage to myself. I just absolutely, absolutely no mercy if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's, hey, what's going on, man? It's like I don't know. It's not a good way to keep yourself in a good state, anyways.
No, that's right. And it comes down to something we've talked about several times in all of our episodes is, am I friends with my mind? Are we on good terms? Do we treat each other well?
Yeah.
And that's in all aspects. And that's in recognizing the needs of our mind, and in our mind recognizing the needs of our body. And are we working together to achieve our goals? And when I think of like taking in all of the information that's out there in the world and all of the negativity that's out there, are we being kind back to that? Like, if it was someone else that was taking on trauma and taking on all of this negativity, we might be more inclined to reach out to them and to be good to them. But when it's us taking it on, we sort of tell ourselves that we have to take it on, or that this is just how it is, or that we should be taking on more. And it's not the case.
No, it's not the case. And it's hard to learn that for some people. Myself, it took me a long time and it's got nothing to do with your level of confidence or your self-esteem or anything like that. It's about being on your own team. Like, are you an ally? Are you working towards the same end? Or, are you setting yourself up to have this kind of inner monologue of like a constant battle going on? And you think about the waste of energy, man. It's crazy.
Yep, it is. It really is. And it's if we don't mindfully catch that and sort of push back and take it on ourselves, and it can just get out of hand, I think.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I find useful is taking some time every day, just setting aside, however much time you've got. For me, it's after work. I set aside a half an hour, and that's for relaxing and just kind of checking in with my mind to see, how are we doing? What's bothering you? What, does anything hurt? Why does that hurt? What's wrong with your foot? What, how come you're so, what's your heart rate? How come you're so, what anxiety issues are you dealing with? How come you feel so good even, I think that probably for a lot of people, they can go weeks and weeks, maybe even months without taking the time to actually sit there and mentally check in.
Yeah, agreed. On the same note as what you're saying, for me, attending the groups that I attend is a way of checking in too, and is also a way of venting it, and to be in a situation where you're kind of, I don't want to say forced, but the whole idea is that you attend these groups and you share how you're feeling, and hopefully that you're honest about it, and that you can speak it and release it and not just carry it around. And hearing that other people are struggling with the same thing is really, really helpful. And I've seen that in the last, maybe say 2 or 3 weeks with the world news that's going on, where there are times where that's just what people need to talk about. And they need to just say, this is really getting me down. This is really wearing on me. Mm-hmm. And we talk about some solutions for that, some coping methods, a lot of the things that we've talked about just here right now with you and I. And almost everyone goes away feeling a bit better and feeling like, okay, I can kind of breathe a little bit easier now.
Yeah. And it might be that it's just a matter of processing how you're feeling enough to verbalize it for some people. Because let's say you're not taking that time, you're a busy individual, you're dealing with your kids, your job, you don't check in. But if you do attend some sort of peer support meeting, you're not required, but you are encouraged to verbalize what's going on in your mind. And, you can't verbalize it without thinking about it if you're gonna do it, like you say, honestly, right?
Yeah. And I've come to love the expression "name it to tame it." Like
Right.
that is so true for me, that when I speak it, when I voice my stress or whatever's bugging me, it feels better on the other side. Particularly when you have, understanding, like-minded people receiving that.
Yeah. Yeah. People don't like to feel like they're the only one experiencing a negative, any negative experience, but it helps tremendously just to see that you're not alone. Other people think this way. And, yeah, it's kind of validating, and it grounds me.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So I guess one thing that a lot of people have probably either struggled with or come to terms with one way or the other is managing what coping mechanisms they're using, and is right now with the way things are. I think it's never been harder to manage in a healthier way. So I wonder how many people out there were in a situation a couple of years ago where they weren't concerned about how much they were drinking. They weren't thinking, I mean, they knew they should quit smoking, but they weren't smoking that much. And now maybe their drinking's a problem. Now maybe they're smoking 2 packs a day. These increases in those type of unhealthy coping mechanisms. Again, I would love to see some sort of data on that, and what the long-term effects would be from that.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Yeah. And I don't know that we will ever know all of that, but I do think that people are thinking about that stuff more now. And it's probably being discussed a little bit more now.
Yeah, that's a silver lining for sure. If any, people have had time to think, and they've had time to ruminate, and there's been, maybe more check-ins as far as am I drinking too much right now? What's my relationship like with cannabis? Is it hurting? What, is it going against the grain of what I'm trying to do, and what how I want to live? These questions maybe were asked a little more often, and maybe that'll be a positive that comes out of it. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I hope so too.
I did want to also mention, I run into this a lot as a pharmacist. It's people really feeling like a failure, or feeling weak because they can't go on, or they've chosen to seek help with pharmaceutical aid, or through natural health means, like or natural health products like St. John's, or valerian, or melatonin to sleep. And I think it's important for people to maybe, obviously nobody wants to be on an antidepressant. I totally understand that. But I believe there's a time in a person's life, for some individuals, where you're going to get more benefit out of that antidepressant than risk. And in that case, I would encourage people to, if you've tried a lot of these things that we're discussing, and you still feel like you can't cope, and that you're trying to find an escape that's not, it's not enough, it's not powerful enough for you, then it could be that you need a little more support. And due to the circumstances and just the world that we live in, like this is a weird place for the human animal to be. And I think a lot of our nervous system has just not caught up to the pace that we're at now. And because of that, you're seeing a lot of people needing extra help. And I mean, I've been on an antidepressant for years. I've tried going off it a few times, but it's just, it's too much, and I've also seen people who just in the last couple of years have reached a point where they were adamantly opposed to that kind of a method of coping, and they got to a point where they wanted to just take try a 3-month stint where it was just enough to kind of get them through a tough spot, and then they chose the right medication, were able to come off it, and everything's fine. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't feel bad if you get to a point where that is necessary.
Yeah, and like the stigma that exists for drug use in general, the mental health stigmas that exist in our society are very, very real, and they also exist within our own minds. And that oftentimes what we are telling ourselves about that subject is rooted in old stigma too, old messages of things that we've heard about weakness and about just powering through and snapping out of it and all this stuff. And it's just not true. But those stigmas, and if we really start to pay attention to them, they're still out there.
Yes, they are. And I think everybody should remember that there's no manual for human beings on how to live in 2022. So, if you're still using, even if you're using or kind of employing thought process that were maybe successful for people 100 years ago or 50 years ago, they don't really apply in this, whatever this is.
No.
So
no,
again, you got to be a little nicer to yourself sometimes, for sure.
Yeah.
And that also, the other thing we could say is that it's important to not just take the time to check in, but also take the time to do something you like, or to check off the personal recreation time too, whether that's go to a spa, get a massage, whatever you need to do. Don't let those things slip, and try to make them a part of your schedule as well, because they're necessary.
Yeah, and we can tell ourselves later, we can procrastinate and say that there are so many other important things that we need to be doing. But at the end of the day, if we take that time for ourselves, we'll be more productive anyway, we'll be healthier anyway, and we can get to all those other things.
Yeah, and that leads me to the last thing that I wanted to discuss. I'm not sure if you have some more stuff, Corey, but I recently, these books on organization over the last few days have been pretty popular, right? And I just read one, and there's a lot of wisdom there, as far as, it's not like I'm not organized, but by taking the time, like I read this book and I thought, what, let's try what this lady's talking about. So I reorganized everything in my home. I got rid of things that I'm never going to use again. I cut everything down to just the bare minimum, and then really took the time to think about, do I need this device or whatever, or do I need this, or how is my kitchen set up, for example? Is it set up in a way that makes everything easy, or is it set up in a way so that every day I'm taking an extra 5 steps that way, And I think one of the things that happens when you do that is it has sort of a spillover effect, so that in the rest of your life, it's a great reminder that taking the time to just stop and think about what you're doing or how you're feeling makes more sense, even from an efficiency point of view. I can be terrible at this, where as a pharmacist, we're always encouraged to move faster, right? And I can get into a mode where I'm just, it's almost like a frantic kind of pace, right? And this is not good for anything. And I sort of like what you were talking about with a movie, where it sets a tone for your mind. That's what sometimes if I just let myself get into that kind of frantic pace and don't set up kind of boundaries where, it's going to take a little while longer than that, just everybody calm down type of thing. Then by the time I leave, I still have that frantic pace. Takes a long time to settle down. And when I look back at what I've accomplished versus if I would have just calmed down and organized a little bit better and taken my time, I mean, the organized technique wins every time, and it's way less energy.
For sure. And it really feels good. Nathan, I'm sure some of our listeners would be interested to know what that book is. Do you know the name of it offhand?
That one is called Organizing Life. And I can't think of the author's name off the top of my head, but it's fairly popular right now. I'm sure it will pop up on a search.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that, Corey?
No, I think that's a great note to end on.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we'll leave it there, and hopefully we touched on some things that can help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
and
everybody.
Feel free to comment. There's lots to discuss with this particular subject, and we'd love to hear your own experience with some of these things that we're touching on, and how any of these techniques have impacted you or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, leave us a comment on YouTube, and you can always email us as well. Recovery Machine, US as in us at recoverymachine.org. That's ORG.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. We will leave it there and see you next time.
Thanks. See you soon.